Peach Pundit, the podcast, is a conversation filled with the personal opinions of the people who are participating. Any view or opinion expressed belongs only to the person who expressed it and not with anyone with whom that person is professionally affiliated.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Peach Pundit, the podcast. I am Jason Pye, joined this week by Scott Turner. We are buzzless. We are without the buzz.
I need to go take a hit so I can get a buzz.
You know what I did on Friday? I didn't get a buzz. I got tattooed again.
Well, that's the same thing for you. You're like addicted to that crap. I don't understand it. I don't.
Yeah, well,
just get yourself a t-shirt and you can change these things, leaving that stuff permanently on your body. Explain it to me.
It is an addiction. So I found a tattoo shop up here in Richmond called Absolute Art downtown. And I used to go to Kingdom Tattoo in Decatur. So I had to find a new tattoo shop, and dude does really good work. And we were supposed to do like 2 or 3 tattoos that day in different spots on my arm because I'm filling the empty space I have left on my right arm. This one I got on Friday, if you can see here, is inside my right arm. This is a very sensitive area, and it hurt like hell. And I tapped out after the first one.
Yeah. I noticed there's not a lot of color in that one.
There's a little bit. No, there is a little bit of color.
Yeah.
So this is something Emily wanted me to get. It's like a medieval tapestry that has a rabbit riding a dog.
So now you have a rabbit riding a dog and
holding
a man
holding a snail in his hand,
and a man riding a manatee on your body permanently.
Yeah.
I rest my case. These are not things that need to be permanently placed on one's body.
I also got Thor as a frog and Loki as a crocodile. So I have Throg and Croaky on my left leg.
And Albert, the alligator.
It's not Albert the alligator. It's Lyle, the Lyle crocodile. I'm tired of having to explain this to you. It was the first movie I saw with Emily and Reagan. And it was from the first day I met Reagan.
All I'm saying is if you put them in a lineup in the Usual Suspect style and you had them, say go Gators.
Do you know the differences between a crocodile and an alligator?
In cartoon style? No, I don't.
Oh my God. I hate you so much right now. By the way, listening to the intro music, could you guys believe that I write music that was so positive sounding and happy sounding?
It's happy.
As opposed to...
And the kicker is you do all of it. There's no separate drummer. There's no separate guitarist.
Nope.
You put it all, you make it and you make it work. It's for
people who actually don't know, I played in a punk band for about 6 years when coming out of high school I think I was 23 when I stopped playing music, and then playing a cover band in DC where I play guitar. So I played drums in this punk band and then I switched over to guitar, but I've been playing guitar since I was 16. So we actually have political topics. We have a lot of stuff to discuss because we're buzzless, and Scott and I have just been inundated in our professional lives. We don't have any quick hits. This is just a lot of talking about a few different subjects. So we're going to go pay some bills. We'll be right back.
On Monday, June 2nd, Americans for Prosperity, Georgia is hosting a candidate forum for the State Senate District 21 special election. The event takes place at Timbers on Etowah in Canton. Doors will open at 6:30 p.m. and the program kicks off at 7 p.m. sharp. This is your chance to hear directly from the folks who want to fill the seat recently vacated in the Georgia Senate. And like I've told you, and I'll say it again, local elections matter even more than the ones that get all the national media buzz. The people we send to Atlanta make real decisions about your taxes, your schools, your roads, and your right. And AFP has a history of putting together solid events. And given the stakes of this particular race, I expect a very lively crowd and some very pointed questions. And it has been confirmed I am moderating that event. So I hope to see you there. Again, June 2nd. Thank you to our friends at Americans for Prosperity for being a partner-level Patreon. If you, too, would like to be a patron to the podcast, head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit and sign up for one of our tiers. Today, at the very least, hit the like and subscribe button. That helps us out a ton. You can also leave a comment. For those who are leaving a comment, thank you so much. It really does help us out a ton. I really appreciate it.
Golden Retriever Rescue of Atlanta, GRRA, is an all-volunteer, tax-deductible charitable organization. They are dedicated to providing veterinary care, comprehensive evaluation, and foster and adoptive homes to golden and Labrador retrievers who are abandoned, mistreated, neglected, or left in shelters throughout Georgia. We encourage you to visit their website grra.com and help connect people and dogs that need each other in their lives. You truly can make this world a better place by helping find homes of gold for these golden-hearted pups.
Let me get back over to unmute myself. Jeez. Sorry about that. So tomorrow, my bride and I are going to be heading up to Washington, D.C. Early in the morning. I'm making her leave the house at 7 o'clock in the morning. We are driving up to D.C. We're boarding the dog right now, and we are Reagan-less this week. I'm going to work in the office, do some meetings, and then around 5, we're heading over to the 930 Club, which is a venue I've seen shows at, to hear Jake Tapper and his co-author, whose name escapes me, talk about their new book, Original Sin, which, for those of you who have not heard about this, and honestly, if you pay any attention to politics, I suspect you have heard about this without even knowing about it or knowing what it's about, where it talks about the decline of former President Joe Biden during his presidency and into the re-election campaign, which culminated in a disastrous debate performance that frankly speaking was just really bad, like sad to watch. So
painful to watch.
It was painful. We turned it off after 15 minutes. We were like, this campaign's over. So, but we're heading up. We're really excited, just given what we've heard from this. Heard about the book. I take no sort of pride, I guess, or happiness or joy from seeing Biden's decline. Am genuinely curious, and there were signs of there were signs of this during his presidency and even his first campaign. But how did people around him insulate him to the point where it was hidden to the extent that it was?
But it wasn't hidden, Jason. We all saw it.
To some degree, it was.
Peter Doocy has a thread. Peter Doocy of Fox News, the White House correspondent for Fox News, has a thread out that's a couple hours old as of the time we're recording, where he listed 7 different times he was gaslighted by the White House press secretary for asking questions about the mental acuity, going back years, in fact, to 2019 when he was asking about, are you only going to run for one term if you run? And it is every time anybody that was sort of skeptical or in the media, people like Jake Tapper, frankly, helped create this narrative that it's a right-wing conspiracy. I have the book. I started reading it today. I did not pay for it. I got a free copy on Audible because you can sign up for Audible for a month if you don't want to have an Audible account, and they will give you a free month. And I think
I have 2 credits on Audible. I pay for Audible for Reagan.
There you go.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I did not want a penny of my money going to Jake Tapper for this book, but I want to read it because I want to know what's in it for myself. And the very first chapter is completely damning. Over 200 Democrats spoke, mostly Democrats, they said, the vast majority of the 200 people they spoke with, who had personal interactions with Joe Biden, came out of their interactions in the last couple of years of his presidency saying this guy cannot be president. And Jake Tapper was part of that. He was part of it. And honestly, I can't think of anything in my lifetime that is a bigger scandal than the White House covering up who was running the country during Joe Biden's presidency, because they all are admitting now that he didn't have the ability to do it. And Joe Biden was so delusional. In the first chapter, Jake Tapper says he woke up on the day after Election Day pissed off because he thought he could win and it was stolen from him. And the first chapter is called "He F'd Us." Sorry, Miss Laura. It doesn't. They don't censor the word F in the chapter because it's a quote directly from David Plouffe, the former campaign manager for Barack Obama. He's saying Joe Biden F'd us, and they all thought that they would have a shot if they had a robust primary. But here's the thing. Somebody was running the country, and it wasn't Joe Biden. So, I'm not one, Jason, to be performative. I don't want there to be a bunch of circus clowns running the government. But on this, there need to be congressional hearings, and they need to be taken seriously.
Those congressional hearings wouldn't be taken seriously just because they would be viewed as partisan, which that's ultimately what they would turn into. And let me. I am not defending the hiding of this. And look, there were signs of, obviously, that Joe Biden was mentally aging, but he's also, I mean, how old was he when he left office? He was
81 years old when he left
81
office.
years old. Trump is going to turn 80 in June. I mean, like, let's be honest here. We have, I mean, and I'm not saying this is not whataboutism. I'm just saying, like, these things happen as people get older. And this was a risk that we all knew that voters knew was there when Joe Biden was elected at the age of 77, 78 years old in 2020. What I am going to say is, in sort of response to what you're saying, the notion that any president is, like, the quote, the running the country. No president they have access to all the information they need to make informed decisions, but that's why they pick these advisors and so on to gather that information to present reports. Whether Joe Biden understood that stuff or not, I think is a question that needs to be answered. But the way the presidency functions is a lot more complicated than I think anyone really understands. And I'm not saying I even have a full understanding of it, but
again, I'm not too far into it, but I have read part of it. And the parts that, for example, Tapper mentions an interview he did with a world leader, an unnamed world leader, where they describe a meeting that he had as 90 minutes of rambling. And this world leader saying, how do I stop? How do I get myself out of this situation? Because he's not making any sense. And he came away from the interaction with the president saying, I can't believe that guy is president of the United States. There's no way he could run for re-election, right? And they all knew. George Clooney knew and didn't say anything until it was too late.
Well, it wasn't. Clooney's op-ed came, I think, after the debate, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah,
it did. But he knew.
But like to say Jake Tapper knew, like, I don't know how many one-on-ones Jake Tapper, the people who are White House correspondents, the reporters who were at the White House every day covering the White House, like Peter Doocy, who, I mean, look, I don't know enough about him. I've met the guy. Seems like a nice guy. I don't know enough about him. I'm sure he's presenting what he thinks is and what may actually be the truth. I don't know.
All he did today was show all the times that he asked. He asked 7 different times over the last 4 years about the mental acuity of Joe Biden. And every time she just shut him down.
There are solutions to this. And like, if we're going to have a conversation, if there are going to be hearings on this, there needs to be an end goal. It's not just to drag Joe Biden's name through the mud or the people's name about people who are around him around the mud. If we're talking about a constitutional amendment to put an age minimum for the person who is going to be the chief executive of the country, I'm for that. But if it's just because it's going to devolve into a partisan boxing match, because that's the way these things go, there needs to be an end goal here.
Well, here's the end goal, right? There's a 26th Amendment for a reason. Why wasn't it exercised? Why didn't the cabinet, who had access to him on a more intimate basis than the average public, not report back to the American people? Why didn't they do their jobs? They've been empowered for a time such as this with authority to do the right thing. And they didn't. They failed. Does it need to be adjusted? Is that a debate that we need to have? If it's there and it's not being used, why? I think that's a question the American people need to know. The American people deserve answers on this. And I know what you're saying is valid, that it would turn into a circus, which is why I'm hesitant to say, that's why I couched my statement. I don't like circuses when it comes to politics. I'd rather go down to State Farm Arena to watch the circus, not watch it in the halls of Congress. And I know that's where we are right now with a lot of folks up there who look at their job as, what kind of TikTok video can I create rather than what kind of policy I can get done to help the American people. But again, can you think of, I mean, honestly, think about all of the scandals, Teapot Dome, all the scandals, the Iran-Contra affair, all of the scandals in American history that have to do with the president, Nixon. How was any of that worse than somebody being asleep at the switch because they're not mentally able to do the job and everybody around them conspired to cover it up?
Comparatively speaking, I mean, any of the gates, whatever you want to call them, I think there are some gates that are just as bad, if not worse. I do think people need to answer for this, but that setting needs to be bipartisan. There needs to be bipartisan agreement on this. It cannot be a partisan shouting match.
We've just been shown that the Democrats will conspire to cover the truth on this, and they have willful co-conspirators in the media. When Donald Trump talks about the media being the enemy of the people, I can think of no better example that validates that viewpoint than the fact that they did not exercise the same level of skepticism with Joe Biden and other elected Democrats than they would with any Republican.
They're looking at the history of the United States. We've always had media that's been partisan. You go back to the time of the Federalists and the John Alexander Hamilton's Federalist Party and Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republicans. There were Federalist newspapers. There were Democratic and Republican newspapers. They fought. They promoted partisan talking points. All that's there. All that's always been there. It's never gone away. Today, it's just in different mediums. It's what conservatives label as the mainstream media versus the right-wing echo chamber of media that's out there. You have alternatives like Ben Shapiro and Breitbart and all these different other websites who promote their stories, their side of the story, and I'm not defending the mainstream media. I know that when I'm writing something, I read through, when I see some news that I want to cite, I read through it, make sure it's what I know to be true before I go and cite it. The problem with the media today, both whether we're talking about Fox News or MSNBC, is there's way too much opinion, there's way too much tribalism, and everybody has their quote-unquote truth.
If the hearings are done, if there are congressional hearings, I hope there are. I really do.
Well, Republicans have the gavels in both the House and the Senate.
Right. And I what I hope is that it cuts the media out as middleman. You would have people coming and either pleading the fifth, and a bunch of them have already been preemptively pardoned. I don't know why they would plead the fifth, but either plead the fifth or tell the American people what happened. And then from there, without the media being the middleman and spinning all this stuff, I mean, they would still do that, but we would have the source material to make decisions about what direction policy needs to go in regards to this type of situation. We do have a pending octogenarian president incoming, right? He's I don't know how old Trump is, 70,
late 79. 70s. He turns 80 in June.
Right. So he'll be 80 years old, second oldest president in American history, only to Joe Biden.
And let's also not forget that Biden and Trump are not the first octogenarians in the White House. I mean, Ronald Reagan was showing signs of Alzheimer's.
He was.
He was still in the White House in the late 80s.
He was.
And look, Ronald Reagan, my favorite president.
My favorite president as well. Certainly in my lifetime.
And Emily named her child Reagan in part after Ronald Reagan.
Poor kid. Hey, I have a joke for you. I think we beat that topic. I have a joke for you.
Go for it.
You ready?
Yeah.
Keisha Lance Bottoms is running for governor.
That's a good one.
That's it.
That's a good
the joke. That's the punchline. That's the setup and the punchline. Keisha Lance Bottoms is running for governor.
Oh my God. Because she did such an outstanding job running the city of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The only better joke would be that Stacey Abrams is going to run again.
Yeah. The fact that Keisha Lance Bottoms is running is an indicator to me that Abrams won't. Because I don't think Keisha would want to go up against Abrams in a primary.
I always tell candidates, anybody who talks to me about running for office, you have 2 tries and that's it. And then you're just a loser.
Right.
Abrams has lost twice. Give somebody else a try.
And the exception there being Abraham Lincoln. But,
well, yeah.
I mean, he was pretty exceptional in a lot of different ways.
except for that whole suspending habeas corpus thing.
Yeah, let's not go down that rabbit hole. Jeez,
Oh no, I could talk about that.
Can we also just real quick, since you said that, somebody pointed this out to me, the irony of the Lincoln Project complaining about Trump potentially suspending habeas corpus when Lincoln was the president who actually did that.
So
I don't have anything else to say.
Since we've gone down this rabbit hole, I'll note that a couple quick things. Congress was out of session when he did it. They did not reconvene until July 1st. They debated that issue in the entirety of the 37th Congress. And then they eventually passed legislation that retroactively authorized it. That's something that people often leave out while discussing that. So I'll just note that, and note that when Ulysses S. Grant did it in some South Carolina counties in the 1870s during Reconstruction, that Congress authorized him to do it ahead of time.
Right.
So
right.
This is an Article 1 function.
Bringing it back home to Keisha, I mean, talk about trying to fail up. I mean, she just absolutely left Atlanta as a practical crater in the center of the state. And I mean, the hacking where the city was shut down for days on end because of a phishing scam and malware, the police chiefs coming in and out at a rapid rate, the summer of COVID. Oh my gosh. I had Atlanta police officers who were constituents of mine reach out to me and tell me when we went back into session in the summer months, do not be in Atlanta past dark because there are no police. They've all got the blue flu because they're reacting to comments that Keisha Lance Bottoms made. This is the person that wants to be the governor and succeed Brian Kemp, who is possibly the most popular governor, certainly in the last 100 years and potentially in the history of Georgia, and has shown how deft he is at managing this state. And this is the person the Democrats want to put up. It's just a joke.
It's 100% a joke. And I can't. It shows the lack of a bench for Democrats in Georgia. It really does. And yeah, do better. Like your best case scenario would be someone like Warnock or Ossoff running, but you'd lose a Senate seat if they did that. So depending on how bad the economy is. But even then, you take one of them out, who do you have to fill the space they're leaving?
Right.
So, you're in a catch-22. Sorry, Miss Laura, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But yeah, don't know. It's gonna be a lot of fun. It's gonna be a fun race, but it'll be fun to watch the Democratic primary because if Abrams doesn't run it, the field wide open. So Scott's got yet another bone to pick with Geoff Duncan, who admittedly I like. I like the former lieutenant governor. I'm not saying I always agree with him, but I like him. But he has written a piece for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He says Democrats need their own grassroots moment like the Tea Party. And he tweeted out, a Main Street Democrats movement could be the political reset that millions of Americans across this political spectrum are waiting for. Now, before Scott excoriates former Lieutenant Governor Duncan, let me say that I agree with the sentiment that there are millions of voters out there who are waiting for something real and viable. I'm not sure the Democratic Party is it.
Yeah.
Scott?
So Geoff Duncan was disenfranchised with the populist takeover of the Republican Party. And one of the reasons
Join the club.
Yeah, me too, right? I've expressed my disdain for populism. I ranted about it several weeks ago. There's a clip of that out there if you want to go see it. Just the 2 or 3 minutes where I ranted about populism and how it's a destructive force. It's essentially a virus that has taken hold within the Republican Party. And so Geoff wrote a book called GOP 2.0. And in it, I'm paraphrasing probably very poorly, but in it, he says that if the Republican Party just became more moderate, they would win more elections. And the opposite has proven to be true. Donald Trump's move towards the right in a populist fashion, not in a genuine conservative fashion, has proven him wrong, that Republicans can win by sticking to issues that Donald Trump has been talking about. But the balance to that is the fact that the left, the Democratic Party, in their post-action report and their post-action analysis after the election, didn't determine that they needed to move to the middle. That party structure as a whole decided we need to move to the left. And we've seen the fruit of that decision here locally, when after we've been told for decades that there's moral crisis after moral crisis around education and healthcare and tax policy by the Democrats, the one issue they decided to get up and walk out on was whether or not taxpayers should be forced to pay for a convicted criminal's sex change operation. That's the thing they got up and walked out on the room. I will keep coming back to that as a harbinger of things to come. If you are now saying that if only they would come a little towards the middle, then they would be a viable party. They don't have any plans to do that. And so Geoff Duncan's failed GOP 2.0 effort has now become Democrat 2.0, which makes no sense whatsoever. It's not grounded in any reality whatsoever. And it kind of like, is this the real Geoff Duncan? Was he just playing along with the group of conservatives he used to hang out with and call friends when we were all serving in the House together? Because that guy that I served with in 2013 through 2016 specifically, that period of time was among the most conservative people you could possibly meet.
I don't think that's the case. I think everybody goes through periods of evolution in their lives. I am not the same person I was 10 years ago. My politics have largely stayed the same, except for a couple of issues here and there in terms of what I personally believe. How I am willing to translate that at the voting booth has changed. But I think, like, if you went through what he went through, and I'm not saying you did, I know you had some exposure to some of the stuff he went through.
Yeah, because I was there.
No, I know
I did go
there.
through it. I went through all the same stuff that he did.
Right, but to the same extent, though. I mean, and I'm not saying that.
I got a call from the Trump administration asking me to call for a special session to overturn the election. I was there. I lived it. I made decisions that have impacted my reputation. But all the decisions.
I mean, I've always thought you were an asshole. To be clear,
right? Yeah, of course. But I lived it. Pye. Listen, it's something we all did, and we all reacted to it in our own way, and we've all paid the price for it in our own way, and we've also reaped the benefits of it in our own way. But this is the money quote for me from Geoff's piece. This newfound culture of agree to disagree. Yeah, right. There's nothing. Where are the modern Democrats that agree to disagree? Okay. This newfound culture of agree to disagree on the fringe issues would feel like aloe on sunburn to those voters who find themselves one or two social issues away from calling themselves a Democrat. In a nutshell, the size of the Democratic tent would exponentially grow, and a bunch of problems would get solved.
So before you go, but let me just say something. So you align more with the Reagan side of the Republican Party, what's left of it at least,
sure.
Right?
Sure. And I will until I die.
So I align more. I certainly don't agree with everything Ron Paul said or did, but if there is a Ron Paul wing of the Republican Party, that's where I would align. The Rand Paul wing, whatever you want to call it.
Sure. I think of the current members of the Senate, Rand Paul is closest to Reagan than any of them, in my opinion.
I would agree with that to a point, but that's
there's nobody that's going to be like exactly the same. There's no carbon copy of Reagan out there.
No, and that's also an unimportant detail for the purposes of the conversation. The Republican Party, they call them the five families inside the House Republican Conference. There are multiple families. You cannot take Tom Suozzi out of New York and compare him to AOC. They have fundamentally different beliefs. And Tom Suozzi was the guy who won George Santos's old seat. You can't say Jared Golden and AOC, Jared Golden being probably the most conservative member of the House Democratic Caucus, and say he's AOC, because he's not. The guy continuously wins a Republican a district with a PVI of R+5. You can't say that about the Democratic Party. What you can say is that there are a group of Democrats who make the rest of the party look bad. And there was certainly a poll that I saw, and it was on Drudge, that say a majority of Democrats say AOC is the face of the party. That's bad for Democrats.
I think she's going to be the nominee next time around.
I'm not.
You want to place a wager? Yeah, I would. I would be willing to bet a 6-pack of your choosing.
I'm not willing to make the bet. And the reason I'm not willing to make the bet is because I don't know how crazy, because the question, the thing that keeps running through my mind is, what is the Democratic response going to be to Trump? Is it going to be, and I'm talking about the primary electorate, and the primary electorate is much different from the general election electorate. Are they going to put up the most crazy, the most unelectable? Are they going to look for someone who can bring the party not necessarily like more towards the center, but has a appeal with independent voters? And that's the question.
No, they're not. They're not. They're going to go down the AOC route. Bernie Sanders will be too old. AOC is the heir apparent. I think she's the front runner. I don't know for a fact, but I think that she has the best shot based upon the current makeup and the way that the Democrats are behaving right now.
I think she wants Chuck Schumer's Senate seat, personally.
Why would you want to go to the Senate if you can be president of the United States?
Because she has to worry about electability. And that's...
Yeah, but these people don't have... Look, Joe Biden woke up the day after the election day pissed off because he thought he was the only person that could beat Trump.
AOC's first term in office, she was the butt of every Republican joke.
Sure.
Everybody they heaped it upon her.
And the Democrats continue to love her for it.
You know what happened her second term? She went real quiet. And then her third term, she learned, I don't know what happened. My guess is she learned more about the body. She learned more about policy. She got a lot smarter in her third term. And I'm not saying I have many disagreements with AOC. I wouldn't vote for her. That being said, don't underestimate her.
No, I'm not going to underestimate her. That's why I think she could potentially, I think she's the front runner for the Democratic nomination next time around, and I think she has a shot. I really do, because
I think it's going to be someone, and he'll have to answer for a lot of the stuff we talked about in the first segment. Pete Buttigieg, I think, is going to be a real contender.
Yeah,
I think he's the one to watch.
I think he's a dark horse, but I agree with your assessment that he's definitely going to have his hat in the ring. But this is the thing with, bring it back to Geoff before we go on to the next thing, or go pay some bills, whatever you want to do. Geoff's line here about a bunch of problems would get solved. The Democrats don't have a conservative solution. And if you are an ideological conservative, they have zero to offer you. They don't have anything other than just being opposite of Trump on everything. They don't have anything to offer. And I think Geoff has gotten so wrapped around the axle with his, and I hate to use this phrase, but Trump derangement syndrome, where everything Trump is doing must be bad. Therefore, I must go, this group is resisting him. This group is fighting him. Therefore, I identify with this group, without paying attention to the details of the policies that they want to put forth. The debate right now we're having is whether or not we're going to continue funding the Green New Deal, right? And it's part of it.
It's not the Green New Deal. That is not the.
It's part of the debate, right? But that was something that they did and put in place under Biden. And now we're trying to deal with all the spending. Those are the solutions they have to offer. You're out of touch with what the problems are if you think that the Democrats have the best solutions to these problems. They don't.
No, they don't. But just point of clarification, then we'll go to a quick break. Point of clarification, like the spending under Biden. Yes, there was spending under Biden. I don't know if you saw it earlier on Peach Fun at the Signal thread, where our $5 Patreons and up can go and hang out and talk to us or text with us during the day. I sent through, in response to something you had sent, like a chart showing all who was president during times of spending since going back to 2000. The largest spike was in 2020. Now, we were in the middle of a global pandemic.
Right. That's all.
That happened under Trump.
Yeah.
And then Biden continued it in 2021.
And he spent more as a percentage. And that chart that you had was as a percentage of GDP. It didn't have the actual dollar number.
He didn't spend. Yeah, no percentage. You can't determine it. I don't use dollar amounts. I always use percentage of GDP. He didn't spend more as a percentage of GDP than Trump did, compared.
It was more
to 2020. Now the numbers are up, over the previous years. And that has a lot to do with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is some of the things that are actually going to fall out of effect, such as the enhanced marketplace subsidies, which I'm supportive of letting those things go out of effect. But to say the spending problem was created by Biden is just simply not true.
Well, this goes back to last week. We're not going to talk about this too much here, but last week Moody's downgraded our credit rating.
Why can't we talk about that?
Well, if you want to, it's up to you.
We'll go to break. We'll go to break. Then we'll come back and we'll kick off with that.
Sounds great.
Peach Pundit has an anonymous Patreon who would like to invite you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. No one should fight Alzheimer's alone. With your help, no one will. Learn more on their website, alz.org.
Conservatives Concerned is a network of political and social conservatives who question the alignment of capital punishment with conservative principles and values. Our programs include educating conservatives about the failed death penalty system and mobilizing them to bring about its end. We come to this issue for a variety of reasons. Some believe that small government and the death penalty don't go together, especially when we compare the high costs of capital punishment to life without possibility of release. Some don't trust the state to get it right. We already know that some innocent people have been sentenced to death, and for others, it may already be too late. Some believe that the death penalty contradicts our values about protecting life. Find out more at conservativesconcerned.org.
I'm anxious to see the people who actually watch the video and see the stupid stuff we
do during the break.
Yeah, I just did the devil signs. Now it's going to be Jason Pye's a worshiper of Satan.
Well, we already knew that.
I mean, I don't believe in him either. So
that's a line from a movie. The greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world he doesn't exist.
Wasn't that one of like?
Oh, that's the second Usual Suspects reference in one episode.
And then there was Constantine, where it's like, well, you should. He believes in you.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah.
Well, at least somebody believes in me. So we were talking about this before the break, and happy to come back to it because I actually got this when I was walking into the tattoo shop Friday, which, by the way, was May 16th, and a constant reminder of one of my favorite Lagwagon songs, punk rock band called May 16th. So I was rocking out to that on Friday, and Reagan told me I could only listen to it in my office. Which, look, I've never hit a kid before, but come on. That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. That kid's adorable. I actually meant to send you guys pictures from her dance recital on Saturday. So, but Moody's downgraded the United States credit rating. We had a pristine credit rating. They took it one notch down, but they moved the outlook to stable from negative, which kind of is confounding because you look at projected debt and deficits. It ain't good, folks. But they're the one of the big three credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Fitch. They have already downgraded us. I think S&P did it in 2011. Fitch did it in 2023, and now Moody's. That sort of change in our credit rating means it's going to cost more for us to borrow, which I have something to say about that. But it's the situation we're faced in with the United States. It's not good, particularly as we talk about this tax bill, which I know we'll get to in a minute. But Scott.
So, when the news broke, my initial reaction is the media is going to blame Trump for this. And let me be clear. Every elected official, especially over the last decade, has had a hand in that. Every single one, Republican
100%.
or Democrat, Joe Biden, Donald Trump. They've all had their hand. And frankly, so did Barack Obama. And I will go back and say, as far back as the New Deal, every elected official since the New Deal has gotten here. But this is the rationale for the ratings downgrade to AA1. The very first sentence: over more than a decade, U.S. federal debt has risen sharply due to continuous fiscal deficits. During that time, federal spending has increased while tax cuts have reduced government revenues. As deficits and debt have grown and interest rates have risen, interest payments on government debt have increased markedly. And we don't see anything to rectify that on the horizon, do we, Jason?
No, we don't. In fact, there's reason to believe that the Congressional Budget Office, so in January, they released their updated budget and economic projections, which you can go and look at this. You can read the report. You can download all the data in Excel spreadsheets and see it for yourself. Their economic projections, in our debt, the interest rates, what we pay, the yield for 10-year treasuries, or is indexed to 10-year treasuries. CBO projected that in Q4 of 2024, the interest rate would be 4.202%. In Q1 of 2025, the yield would be 4.245%. And then in Q2 of 2025, it would be 4.113%. They got that wrong.
Massively, right?
I mean, not massively, but enough.
It makes a difference.
It makes a difference.
And they got it wrong they were on the low side, obviously.
They were too optimistic.
Right.
The yield was 4.28% in Q4, 4.45% in Q1, and we were, as of May 19th, 4.455.
So it's trending in the opposite direction of where we need it to go.
That's exactly right.
And this has a direct impact on our ability to service the national debt, because it is subject to that interest rate.
The more it goes up, the more interest rates go up, the higher, the more we have to spend on that interest to service that debt. So the way you have to look at it is not just new debt that we're talking about, because like you don't issue debt and it goes away. That's not what happens.
It's not like a student loan under Joe Biden.
That's a good way to put it. The debt rolls over every, like 15 to 20% of the debt rolls over every year. So that debt doesn't go away. It has to be reissued as securities, put on the market, and it's put on the market at higher rates. We're talking about debt that might have existed pre-COVID that was getting, a 2% yield.
Mm-hmm.
That now is going to be getting a 4.5. Now I haven't looked at the 10-year treasury yield since COP May 19th. It fluctuates on a daily basis.
And something else that has an impact on those rates is the bond market itself, and whether the bond holders start dumping their bonds because they don't think they're going to get the return. And so the rates go up to compensate for the excess supply of bonds.
And just in case people are maybe interested, as of 5:05 p.m. today, May 21st, the yield on the 10-year treasury was 4.597.
So it's gone even up since Monday.
Yeah. So, I mean, but yeah, it's, the yield goes up because there's a lack of interest in buying our debt.
Right.
Or there's dumping of our securities on the market. It can go up for another number of reasons.
And who's been dumping is a great question too, because the tariff situation, a lot of our debt holders have decided to dump, which skyrocketed overnight. Like Japan held some of our debt, and they decided when they got slapped with tariffs that they would start dumping.
Yeah, Japan and China both. And those, Japan is the number one foreign holder of our debt. China is number two.
Which indicates to me that the tariffs is one of the reasons why Trump was so fast to roll them back and abandon the larger tariffs, was because we can't afford for the interest rate on our national debt to spike. We're negotiating from a standpoint of weakness there.
Yeah, and that's something this is why the Mar-a-Lago Accord thing that we mentioned several weeks ago didn't make a lot of sense, because you're accounting on, like, if the goal was to make the dollar weaker, to renegotiate, to make exports look more attractive in international markets, and to, get these these century bonds or whatever the case may be, you have to count on a lot of factors. And those factors, I don't think were this was a half-baked idea, is essentially what I'm trying to say.
Right.
But this stuff is highly problematic, considering that, interest is already a higher expense than defense. Interest this year will be over $1 trillion, and nobody's serious about fixing the problem. Scott was absolutely right when he said that every president, going back to FDR, bears some responsibility for this, including the presidents who expanded entitlements. And that, you start with FDR and Social Security, which it was said at the time that this was it wasn't actuarially unsound when it was created, but
Well, the promise was the Al Gore vision of the lockbox, right? It would be separated funds, but they haven't treated it that way. They keep taking loans from the Social Security Trust Fund to pay for other things.
And I can't explain this to you on air right now, but that's not, and I told my tattoo artist this too the other day, that's not an accurate representation of what happened, but that's a topic for later, like off air. The issue here is, one, there were 40 something workers for every beneficiary when Social Security was created. And that was the case until, for a few years. And those the baby boom, it spiked. But I think now have 2.3, 2.5 workers per beneficiary now. And the program has become actuarially unsound, which is why the OASI fund, the Old Age and Survivors Trust Fund, will be bankrupt in 2023, or I should say, I have enough money.
2033?
2033, not have enough money to pay out scheduled benefits. Congress will either have to bail out the trust fund, or there will be an immediate 23 percentage point cut to benefits. Now, I see you closing your eyes. Either that's because of the sound of my microphone, or you're just like, I can't believe this.
I can't believe this. It hurts me. That's why.
So, yeah, but that's where we are. And then you have Trump saying, I'm going to protect Medicare and Social Security. Oh, and don't F with Medicaid. Sorry, Miss Laura.
It's just...
So, yeah, so Trump is adding to the problem, which brings us to our next part of conversation, which is an update on these just absurdly named One Big Beautiful Bill. One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I should say, HR 1, which is the bill number it was given. So it's a leadership bill. That's how you know it's a leadership bill, because they get the first 10 bill numbers. So, Scott, ask away. Ask me your questions. What do you want to know? What can I help you understand?
How do I write a check to Thomas Massey's reelection campaign?
Right? I texted him today.
I want him on the show. Let's get him on the show.
Yeah, I'll reach out to him.
We're usually Georgia politics, but geez, let's get Thomas Massey on the show. I've met him in the past. He stood in front of me.
Colleague.
He was I don't have the best relationship with that former colleague. And if you know anything about Georgia politics, you know exactly who and why I'm talking about that in that term. But Thomas Massey was on stage in front of us, standing directly in front of me when I was on stage with Rand Paul. He made his announcement in Louisville, Kentucky, is running for president of the United States. So I've met him in the past. I don't know him well. I don't know that he would even remember seeing me there, but I would love to have him, because it seems like he's the only one right now. It's being responsible.
Yeah, no, it certainly seems that way. And I would say he's not the only one. I think there are others who are at least sort of paying attention. The problem that I have with the bill is, because I think I mentioned this last week, like I wrote the IRS a $20,000 check. Like I hate taxes. I'm a free market guy. I'm fundamentally a libertarian. I want my tax low and my government limited. That being said, I'm looking at, just based on our previous topic here, looking at the river of red ink coming from Washington, D.C., and I don't know how we afford this. And I say that afford this not in the sense of like that's the government's money. No, that money belongs to individuals who earned it and should keep as much of it as possible. The problem is the Republican budget that they passed in March, HCon Res 14, assumes growth of 2.6% per year over 10 years. They expect $2.6 trillion of economic activity from the tax cuts, which means the tax cuts would pay for half of themselves. The problem is that's not going to happen. And TCJA, the best estimate I've seen, paid for about 26% of itself.
That's up from, we said 16% last week. So you've seen other.
Did I say 16%?
Last week you did, but
I think last week I was referring to an estimate of the extension of TCJA.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and this estimate I got from the Bipartisan Policy Center.
So tell me a different question, but definitely related to this debate. Mike Lawler up there from New York, Republican congressman from New York, is wanting the SALT deduction to be increased. Explain to me, like, I don't know what it is. What is the SALT deduction, and why is that his hang up?
So the SALT deduction stands for the state and local tax deduction. What it means is that individuals who itemize their taxes, meaning they don't take the standard deduction, can include their taxes at the state and local level to be deducted from their total income liability. Prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, you could fully deduct your state and local taxes from your income.
Mm-hmm. But they raised the standard deduction so high.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So and I can get to that if you want me to, because I actually just wrote something about this for the business website the other day. So yes, they increased the standard deduction. They almost doubled it to like $12,000. They increased it. That's for an individual filing solely, and then a married couple filing jointly is $24,000. That was when it started. It's been indexed to inflation. It's gone up since then. So we capped the SALT deduction at $10,000, not indexed to inflation. It's $5,000 for like an individual, a married person filing individually, and then $10,000 for a married couple filing jointly. But that's set to expire at the end of this year, because the tax cuts expire at the end of this year. They've been holding out for an increase in that cap. Now, their asks have been sort of all over the place. They started, I think, there was a bill introduced, I think, at 100,000, which is just absurd. But they have since, now they're around, I think Republican leadership had agreed to 30. I think now that they've worked out a deal around 40,000, but there's some details there that I think it kind of goes away. I think the point at which it goes down to $400,000 from like 700,000 something, where it'll start. So that's sort of the state and local tax deduction. The reason these guys are holding out for it, and you'll notice that it's mostly members from New York, New Jersey, and California, at least the main five are from those states, is because it's a big giveaway to people who live in those states.
Right. So it disproportionately benefits New York, California, the big liberal states that tax the crap out of their citizens.
Yes.
So it's a subsidy for them having higher taxes. So a state that has a much lower tax rate on the whole, like Georgia, would end up subsidizing the higher state and local taxes in another state like New York.
Right. So taxpayers in 3 states, California, New Jersey, and New York, represented 21% of those who itemized in tax year 2017.
Mike Lawler can take this idea and shove it straight up his tailpipe.
That is 9.681 million returns, which allowed these taxpayers to deduct $166.9 billion from their income, or roughly 27% of the $624.8 billion deducted through SALT.
Here's the other thing, too. This is Howard Gleckman, a senior fellow at TPC, says while the vast majority of middle and upper income households received tax relief from TCJA regardless of where they lived. So the vast majority of Americans, regardless of your income level, you receive some sort of benefit from TCJA. But you would have received even more had the cap not been instituted on SALT.
So let's start by saying in 2017, 21.6% of the individuals who claimed SALT had an AGI of under $100,000.
Okay.
Almost 29% of them had an AGI of $500,000 or above. 21.7% had an AGI of $200,000 to 49, just under $5,000. So you're talking about almost actually right at half made over $200,000 or more. That's not there are people in the upper middle class in those income figures, and you also adjust for, cost of living. It's, these states tend to be more expensive
because the taxes are so high and they get embedded in everything.
That's right. The good thing about the SALT cap was in 2022, only 15 million tax filers used the SALT deduction, reducing their income by a total of $397 billion. That's a win. And disproportionately, yes, higher income earners are the ones who benefited from it. But these are people who are going to itemize anyway. I see that as a win on the whole. If I had my druthers, we would get rid of every deduction and credit in the tax code, and we would just have a large standard deduction and a single rate. I don't get to make the tax policy, unfortunately.
But you're a flat tax guy, right? That's how we do it in Georgia.
Big flat tax guy.
Yeah, it's essentially a flat tax here. Everybody gets the same deduction. Everybody pays the same.
And the closest we've ever had to a flat tax in the United States was from in 88, 89, and 90. We had two tax rates, and that was it. But what I was going to say was this is and Scott's right. This is disproportionately a big giveaway to high tax states, which tend to be blue states.
And so you're removing the incentive for those states to be more conservative in their spending.
Well, they all have higher per capita spending than your standard red state.
At the expense of the average Georgian.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Mike and
Lawler,
it's not just income taxes; it's sales taxes.
He can take this idea and shove it straight up his tailpipe.
But let me. I'll finish up this segment because we're right at an hour, and I know Scott wants to get moving. But let me just say this: the CBO score came out. It's still incomplete because there's some things that haven't done yet. But the budget deficit increase will be $2.3 trillion over 10 years. I think that's better than a lot of people expected. They don't dynamically score it, so that doesn't take into account economic activity. Tax Foundation released their own estimate of based on the Ways and Means text that was, I think, marked up on May 13th. They project a budget deficit of $3.3 trillion over 10 years, and that doesn't include interest costs. And that they say that basically it pays for. I had an estimate. I had it here. I've misplaced it. It doesn't pay for half of itself. I think it pays for around 20% of itself. The Committee for Responsible Federal Budget estimates $3.26 trillion in increased deficits, including $580 billion in new interest costs. It's not going to pay for itself. It was never intended to pay for itself.
Is it going to pass? Finish up.
I think it's likely.
You think it's likely it'll pass?
I think it's likely it'll pass. But it's what comes out of the House isn't going to be the final product.
2 quick kicks before we go. Brian Kemp has invoked one of my least favorite phrases in Georgia politics: keep your powder dry. He's, according to Greg Bluestein, he has told his top donors to keep their powder dry and give him and President Donald Trump more breathing room to settle on a candidate who can defeat Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff. Any thoughts?
I mean, who's it going to be?
I don't know. I guess we just the keep your powder dry is I got this. Trust me.
I like Governor Kemp. He's a great guy. I'm not saying this is a good idea or a bad idea. I'm not saying I am going to say I don't trust Trump's judgment,
especially when it comes to Georgia politics. I'm glad that the Trump team is leaning on Kemp as opposed to, railroading him like they had in the past. I'm glad he's part of the conversation, which this time last year it didn't seem like he was ever going to be part of the conversation.
But I think your best candidate of the list of rumored candidates is Buddy Carter, and the guy just points his finger in the wind. He and just sees which direction the political winds are going. The guy's too ambitious to be in elected office, and I think
you hit on something there. I think that it's a condemnation of Buddy Carter's candidacy since he's the only announced candidate. For Kemp to be saying keep your powder dry, Trump and I are working on this, and Buddy Carter out there saying I'm the MAGA guy.
No, you're not. You're the MAGA guy today. You're going to be the guy for whoever's the next. Tomorrow you're going to be if J.D. Vance wins the nomination in 2028, you're going to be Mr. National Conservative.
Right. So,
I'm sorry. It just you.
But it's a condemnation of that candidacy.
But it's not Mike Collins either.
Right. Well, I mean, we don't know if it's going to be Mike Collins or not. At this point, there's only Buddy Carter out there. And what I'm saying is he's out there running. He's already announced.
Yeah.
And Kemp is saying, don't give him money, is essentially what he's saying.
Yeah.
One other quick kick for you. There's this group that is desperately trying to unseat Josh McCoon of the Georgia Republican Party. And, Josh has been a friend. Right now, we're not talking. If you listen to the podcast, you know why. I've talked about it here. But they found an old tweet from Laura Loomer from last year attacking one of Josh's best friends, who is a lobbyist that I've worked with in the past and I think is a good guy. His name's John Garst. And Laura Loomer said, wow, here's a picture of Dominion lobbyist John Garst with his thumbs up smiling next to Georgia GOP, Georgia Republicans chairman Josh McCoon. And Laura Loomer, the crazy one, goes on to say she's wanting to know how John Garst became a presidential elector for Donald Trump. Well, if you know anything, first of all, the picture is of Garst holding a beverage next to Josh. Josh has his arm around him. They're both wearing white jackets in the style of Crockett and Tubbs from Miami Vice with a light blue t-shirt underneath. It's the only picture I've ever seen of Josh McCoon wearing a t-shirt ever. And they had just won. I know the backstory on this because it was shown to me in Josh's presence at one point. Garst and McCoon had actually just won a karaoke contest.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, they did. They did. This is real life. I'm not making this up. The outfits that they're wearing were from their duet that they did. And I've been to karaoke with John Garst in the past, and that dude can do Sex Machine like nobody's business.
I do a really good FU by CeeLo.
I bet you do. I would like to see it.
Get a few beers in me. I'll do it for you.
All right. That's what I have for you for quick hicks. Yeah, anything else?
I just hate these people. I despise these people.
Look, the desperation of these folks, especially in light that Donald Trump has come out and endorsed Josh McCoon for re-election as chairman of the Georgia Republican Party, and they idolize with a cultish like devotion to everything Trump. They must be going through it's not birthing pains, cognitive dissonance. I don't know. It must be really hard for them to adjust to the reality. And so I think in one way that they're doing this, their attempt to adjust is just denying reality altogether. I'm not going to the convention. You won't see me there. I'm not a delegate this year, but maybe one day in the future I'll be a delegate again, but not anytime soon.
I'll only be a delegate.
And I'm never going to say that Democratic Party 2.0 is the solution. Never.
I'm not saying it's definitely not a solution, but you're too hard on Geoff.
I think I've treated him with kid gloves here, to be honest. But we are brought to you every single week by our friends who reach into their pockets voluntarily and sign up for one of our Patreon tiers. We call them the people who rock. And they give us a few bucks to keep this podcast going. Without them, we wouldn't be here. And they are Sam Thomas, Jordan Reed, Shannon Ferguson, Jeff Cobble, Hank Burnham, Ryan Purvis, James Hall, Colin Martin, Tony West and our friends at Americans for Prosperity, Robert Lee and our friends at Lee 6 Media, Stuart Wilkinson, Ron Daniels, Mike Buchert, our anonymous contributor who wants you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association, Bo Brennan, Ryan Graham, John Vestal, Reed Powell, Brett Harrell, and our newest one, Justin Wright. Thank you all for being Patreons to the podcast. Again, you can head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit. Sign up for one of those tiers. We'll put you in the Signal chat and we'll leak you all of our top secret military operational details as they happen.
You guys want pictures tomorrow from the Jig Tapper thing?
Yeah, I do, actually.
Okay.
Pete, and I want you to ask questions like, what were you doing, dude? Can you do that for me?
If there's a Q&A part, maybe.
Please let there be a Q&A. Peach Brother Podcast is Jason Pye, me, Scott Turner, Buzz Brockway. He's not with us. All the music you hear is original by Jason Pye, and all of the content here is published, owned, and distributed by me, Scott Turner. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time.